Hello, pre-calculus class. This is your teacher, Mr. Jansen, and we are going to start our first unit of the year on quadratics. Now, this is probably a unit that you've seen before in Algebra 2. The reason that I chose this unit to start is because a lot of these topics that we're going to see over and over and over again for the next 2 years. So before we get on to some other things, I want to make sure that we have a really strong foundation. And there's my first technical glitch. The iPad went to sleep. There we go. I want to make sure that we have a really strong foundation in quadratics. So hopefully you remember this from the last couple years, but there are 3 forms of a quadratic equation. First one is vertex form, then we have standard form, and then we have factored form. And all of them have their unique advantages of different things that make it easier to find, their different purposes. So we're going to end up covering all of those. But today, we're just focusing on vertex form. Before we get started, there's a couple definitional things that I want to go over with you. The first is this U-shaped graph. And that U-shaped graph is something called a parabola. And on that parabola, there's going to be some key features that I want to point out to you. The first one, probably the most important one right now that we're going to talk about, is this point that shows up on the bottom, which is called the vertex. And a vertex is sometimes on the bottom, but you can imagine if a parabola opens upwards and downwards, it changes whether it's on the top. So this is also the vertex. It's either called a minimum if it's on the bottom, or it's called a maximum if it is up on the top. So you might hear the words minimum and maximum. That just means it's the vertex. We have a couple more points here. And these 2 points we know as the x-intercepts, because that's where it crosses the x-axis. Now there's a couple other words that we use to describe x-intercepts. They are also called the zeros, because that's essentially just where the graph is equal to 0. And one other word that maybe you've heard before, those are also called the roots. And we won't use that one quite as much. Usually I'll use the words x-intercept or zeros. And one last key feature is here. This is going to be the y-intercept. And that's where it crosses the y-axis. So just a couple quick definitional things before we get going. The U-shaped thing is a parabola. We have the top and bottom of the graph, that's called the vertex. We have the x-intercepts, also known as the zeros, and we have the y-intercept. Now there's one other definition I want to quickly touch on, and it's this imaginary line that goes right through the middle of the graph. And you've probably heard that called the axis of symmetry. And that's because the graph is the exact same to the left of it as it is to the right of it. So axis of symmetry, it goes right up through the vertex, up through the middle of the graph. A quick overview of vertex form. Hopefully this is something you've seen as well, and hopefully after that first assignment that we've done, this hopefully looks a little bit familiar to you. Let's go ahead and start with this part. When that thing is in the parentheses, it's usually going to be moving it side to side. So that h value in here, that's going to shift the graph. It shifts the graph either to the left or to the right. And that essentially gives you, I'm going to put that in parentheses, the x-coordinate of the vertex. And I'll explain that in a little bit. This k value, this number that gets added or subtracted at the end of that, what that's going to do is that's going to shift the graph up or down. So I'm just going to put it shifts it up or down. And it gives you the y-coordinate of the vertex. So the reason that this is called vertex form is because you can really quickly and easily identify the coordinates of the vertex with just this x and this y. Now this a is going to be a little bit more confusing, and it tells you a couple things. It tells you whether the parabola will open up or down, and it's going to open upwards if it's a positive value, and it's going to open downwards if it is a negative value. So remember, if that is being multiplied by a negative, it's just going to take everything and flip it upside down. It also vertically stretches or compresses. So vertically stretch. What that's going to do is it's going to pull the graph up, and that's if the a value is bigger than 1. Or it's going to squash it down, and that's if it's going to be smaller than 1. So that's called compress. So if a is bigger than 1, it's going to stretch the parabola up a little bit. If it's smaller than 1, it's going to squash that parabola down. And we'll talk about a in a little bit. Right now I just want to focus on the x and the y coordinate of the vertex. So let's go down and do a couple examples together. So first, we have x minus 4 squared plus 5, and I want to find the vertex of this equation. So first thing we have to remember is everything is based off of the graph of x squared. And if you think of the graph of x squared, it's just a parabola that has a vertex located at 0, 0, right at the origin. But what this 4 and this 5 are doing to the graph is they're just going to be shifting the graph left and right, and they're going to be shifting the graph up and down. So if I look at that minus 4, your intuition would tell you it's going to go to the left by 4, but the one in the parentheses is always going to be kind of the opposite of what you think. So instead of going to the left by 4, it actually moves to the right by 4. So this graph is going to move to the right by 4, and then that plus 5, it does exactly what you think it would do. It's going to shift it up by 5. So the new parabola would slide over here by 4, then it slides up by 5, and your new vertex would be up there somewhere, and that's going to be at 4, 5. Let's move on to the next one. We have x squared minus 3. Now you'll notice there is no parentheses around this, so what it's not going to be moving left to right like the last one. The only thing that's happening to it is it's moving down by 3. So you can imagine if you start with the parabola right here at 0, 0, and you just move it down by 3, your new vertex is going to be located at 0, negative 3. And similarly for the last one, again, you would think that the plus 6 is going to be moving it to the right by 6, but it goes the other way. It actually moves it to the left by 6. So it's going to be at negative 6, and then your y-coordinate is going to be at 8. So the main thing that I want you to keep in mind is the one in the parentheses is kind of the opposite of whatever your intuition tells you. So if you see a plus 6, it actually goes to the left by 6. The one outside the parentheses, it just moves it up or down exactly like you'd think. So go ahead and pause the video now and try the next 3 on your own. And then when you're done, click restart, and I will go ahead and give you the answers for those. All right, the answers for those 3 should be negative 11, 12, because it moved left 11, and then it moved up by 12. This next one, it moved left by 5, so we have negative 5, and it didn't go up or down at all, so it's negative 5, 0. And the last one, because it says minus in there, it's going to be shifting it to the right by 30, and then it goes down 15, so your vertex is at 30 and negative 15.